What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Elder Scrolls Online Podcast, Episode 3, the Kind of Funny Gamescast limited series. I'm one of your hosts, Greg Miller, alongside the master of hype. In no joke, no lie, no nothing, no cap, my favorite one of your little Zibba putties, Snowbike Mike.
Thank you, Greg. You always make me smile, and I want you to know that this is a medium, and I'm an extra large. How does this work? I don't know, but we're making it work.
Do you feel comfortable in it?
I feel very comfortable.
Okay.
Now, the guy behind the counter definitely looked at me and was like, this is a medium. And I said, well, it fit. And I walked away as fast as I could.
Nice. Rich Lambert, game director on the Elder Scrolls Online. Is he pulling off the medium?
He is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
looking
you.
good.
Okay.
Our guests are saying that. That makes me feel good.
Matt Fyroy, you're back one more time, of course.
We are here.
What do you think?
I'm a big Carhartt fan.
Yeah, all right,
And they're cut very generously.
There we go. Workwear, it's in right
The
now.
generous cut. Studio director, ZeniMax Online. He's
Saying
the
that about
studio's
me.
right there
Watch
for you. Yeah,
out.
right there for you. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 3 of our 4-part series. Yes, that's right. The end is in sight, gentlemen. We'll let you go home to your family soon. You'll be able to stop talking about this game you've been working on for 10 years launched.
Can't
Far
stop,
more.
won't stop.
Can't stop, won't stop. But this is your life. This is it.
Yeah.
I guess, you know what, even before we get into any of the rigmarole, where we've been, blah, blah, Rich, is this the last game you'll ever work on? Do you think you
I don't
work on
know.
this and this is like by the time this all wraps up?
Truthfully, going into it, I didn't know we were going to be working on this for 17, 18 years.
Yeah.
So who knows where the future goes. Yeah.
Okay. Bad answer. Matt, what about you? Is this the last? You've already retired once. You already tried to get out once. They pulled you
He
back
did.
in.
I've launched 2 games since 2001. So, right, and when you're in the live service game, you know, when you do that, you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's you go where the community takes you.
And you think it's going to take you forever? Is this it? Do you think you do this? I mean, I guess, how do you guys tackle that when you think about your own personal career? You forget you're on the ESO show. Your personal careers, right? Like, is there always something happening with ESO so it feels like a new adventure? Because this is something we talk about a lot, where it's like, oh, well, you know, Sony Santa Monica, they didn't want to do 3 God of War games because they didn't want to work on this for 30 years or whatever. Like, how do you tackle that and keep your team motivated?
I mean, it's a privilege to work on this game. I mean,
course.
this is a force of nature, right? But there is a reason why my title is studio director. And his is game director.
You have more. You can freely move about the cabin whenever you want to.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Okay. Well, everyone, if you want to hear more about the Elder Scrolls Online, guess what? You're in the right place, because this is the Elder Scrolls Online Podcast, a Kind of Funny Gamescast limited series. No matter where you're getting it right now, whether it's over on the Elder Scrolls Online channels, whether it's on the Kind of Funny channels, please like, subscribe, share, so we can do more stuff like this. And of course, get you involved in the conversation as we build to the next big update for ESO. As we move into these crazy seasons, we got the worms. It's all happening. But we're not even talking about that. Of course, last episode, we touched about the early days, right, of what was happening with launch. Then, of course, the console stuff. And then we started tiptoeing around one Tamriel.
Right.
We're going to talk about the secrets of Tamriel today. All right, well, I want to get into this. This is something we talked a little bit about, but again, because it's so great to have these episodes where we can come back to stuff. You talked about sitting down with Todd Howard. Okay, this is their game. Oh, this is this great spot where, you know, nobody really knows the historical record of what was happening. Have fun with that. I need to know what we're talking about when we say, hey, let's make a new entry into the Elder Scrolls universe, make it online multiplayer, do all these different things. How do you tackle that from a story perspective?
That's a really good question. I mean, it really starts in the location.
Mhm.
Where are we going? What are we doing?
When is it?
When is it? And as that starts to materialize and starts to gel, then you start digging into, okay, well, in this particular province, High Rock, right? Or Orsinium, I guess Orsinium was post-launch, but you start digging into those, like, what are the people doing there? What are the stories? What are those things? And they just start coming together.
So my question would be, and pro interview tip there, like I asked a question, I didn't direct. I wanted to see who would bite first. All right?
Okay.
Now I'll go to you, Matt, because of course you get called in the ballroom here, right? You get called in this meeting room and they're like, hey, come out of retirement, come do this for us. Like, can I do Fallout? They say, no, you can't. You're like, okay. Even when you say, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to pick this time period where there isn't much known about what happened, does that mean that you then go home and replay all the Elder Scroll games that you start, and while you do it, you're taking copious notes, or is there a giant Bible that's being handed over from Bethesda? Like, where are we at? How does that happen?
So it really starts with you sit down and none of us use this terminology then because it's more modern than 2007. But what we really do is we set up what I call the virtual world. Like, what do you want players to do in this game? Don't worry about the IP yet, right? What's happening? Like, and like I said in the previous episode or 2 episodes ago, like we knew we wanted a strong PvP system. We knew which if you go down that road, it starts asking a lot of questions like, who's fighting in this PvP system? I'm historically a strong fan of 3-sided PvP because we did that in Dark Age Camelot, and it worked really well there because in a 50-50 game, the one with 51% of the power always wins, right?
Yeah.
In a 3-sided, it can go on forever. And so we were committed to that, but that asks a lot of questions. Who are the 3 sides? And then that asks the questions, all right, there's 9 provinces, well, there's 10, but what's happening with the, right? And then the questions start, well, who would be allied together? What are they fighting over? And then you're like, Cyrodiil's in the middle of the map. Oh, Oblivion just came out. We don't want to really go to Cyrodiil because that's where Oblivion just was. So let's make that the PvP zone. What's in the middle of Cyrodiil? In the Imperial City with the Ruby Throne. Okay, we're going to have a PvP system where you fight other alliances to become emperor and sit on the Ruby Throne, right? Those are that's the way the conversation usually goes. And then it's like, okay, now we know that there's these 3 alliances fighting over the throne. What does each alliance do, right? And Rich, I think, came up with the names, which is like the Pact, the Alliance, right, and the Dominion. And the names of those are very evocative of what they are. The Pact is like 3 groups of provinces that aren't usually allied with each other, but they're in it together because they have to. The Alliance is like we're a union of equals, and then the Dominion is like, okay, you're here whether you want to be.
Yeah,
or not,
they're not as kind.
And if you look at the stories for each of those alliances, which we launched with, right, those themes go throughout those. So you have to set up the foundation for the world, and a lot of these questions the more that you answer, the more other questions get answered when they come up.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Rich, for you
process.
coming up with these names, like, is this just you guys back in your house on a holiday break with a ball, like a tennis ball bouncing off the wall, and go, what about this?
Now, this is in the basement at Bethesda, which is where BGS was at the time on whiteboards.
Yeah, in the loading docks. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just throwing ideas out onto a whiteboard and seeing what sticks. But you have to have those foundational pillars that you're starting to build stuff off of.
Sure.
And you just start going 1 block at a time, building, and then something catastrophic happens and you have to solve that problem, and that's game dev, right? And you just keep going until you're done, ship it, and then you keep going and going and going and going.
Going. But to get there, you have to build a series of boxes, right, that you contain the story and the developers and the narrative into, because it can't be wide open, right? You have to be like, okay, this story is going to be about this, and right, you're working in the IP at this time, so you're going to have some limitations about that. So it's not like blue sky, do whatever you want when it comes to the storytelling. It's more like you're telling the story of the Dominion. What are they dominating, right? How does that work? And I don't actually know who came up with the Molag Bal Stole My Soul main story, but that's how it was pitched, literally. Molag Bal has stolen my soul, and I want to get it back. That was literally the tagline for the main story. And so, right, and then it's like, okay, that's what we knew about the story when it started. Nothing else except Molag Bal stolen my soul, and I want it back.
Yeah.
And then
It was Lawrence did a lot of that. Wynn did a lot of that stuff
for bringing back Mana Marco. And they're like, oh, Mana Marco, right, here is a necromancer who could work with Molag Bal, right? Yep. And he comes from going really deep into the geekery of Elder Scrolls here.
Man, this is what it's all about. You got a 4-part show to get as geeky as you want.
But Mana Marco is like the uber lich in the Elder Scrolls universe. He's lived for almost forever, and he pops up in various Elder Scrolls games doing various nefarious things, but he's always the head of the Worm Cult. And the season is coming up. It's called Seasons of the Worm Cult.
I know.
So, but it's right. It's like, so we have a villain now. We have Molag Bal, who's a Daedric prince, and again, our frame of reference at the time was Mehrunes Dagon stomping the Imperial City flat at the end of Oblivion. So that concept was fresh in our mind. And if you played that part of ESO where you get to meet Molag Bal, right? I'm not going to spoil it too much, but there's a scene very similar to that, except he's stomping you flat.
Right.
And And so that was very much done in an homage to Oblivion
Sure.
at the time. But anyway, I digress. So you have Mannimarco, you have Evil, you have Moloch Ball. You're getting your soul back, and then it's creating great characters, and that's where Rich's
and the
team
characters
came in.
just start to organically happen, right? Like, and going into that stuff, I think a really good example would be Cadwell. Like, Cadwell wasn't actually part of the main story when we originally pitched it. You know, Cadwell was written specifically for John Cleese once we realized we could actually get him.
Yeah.
And the team went off. They went and did their thing. They introduced this new character, right?
Yeah,
Like,
we got all the time in the world. So I want to put a full stop on that. How do you realize, we could get John Cleese? Like, what is that? Did somebody know him and casually mention it? Or like...
That's a good question. I don't know how we got him. Yeah.
I mentioned it in the earlier episodes, but ZeniMax, obviously pre-Xbox, had a board of directors that was full of Hollywood people. And so Hollywood insiders, and so we had lots of connections. And even the past Bethesda games had major voice talent.
Of course.
And that's the reason. It's because they knew those people. And so it was, we were given a pretty good budget, because it always makes great headlines when you say that you're working with Malcolm McDowell and Kate Beckinsale and John Cleese and Alfred Molina and Michael Gambon and Bill Nighy, right? These are all like super good actors, and not only did they help raise the profile of ESO, but they're really good. Like, when you interact with them in game, they know what they're doing. Like
100%, even as a noob, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when John Cleese pops up, like, oh my god, this is awesome.
Yeah, and he's believable in that character, right? And it's because our writers, which I'm sure we'll get into, our writers are amazing in ESO and know how to write a character that could take advantage of John Cleese's unique personality.
So you've laid out so much on the table for me, and I like that. I appreciate that. Thank you. You say when you're sitting there, well, forget the world and the IP. What is this game? You want the strong PvP foundation. What are the other boxes that you put up on that whiteboard to really start building out what the original ESO is?
I mean, there were so many different ones, and some of them actually got cut. Like, housing was an original part.
Many of them got cut.
But we just didn't have time to do it. We couldn't do it the way we wanted to. But we started going down what does a Elder Scrolls player want? Well, they want the single player story stuff. Okay, we got that pillar. What do MMO players want? Well, they want group activities. So that's probably where dungeons come in. That's where trials come in. The veteran content type stuff comes in. And we just slowly keep building out those pillars until you get to a point where you're like, okay, we have enough. Okay. Or we have too much. We have to scale back. And then that comes to
yes, that
post-launch.
happens in every game
Post-launch
developer.
stuff,
Of course,
story.
Yeah. What's the it's something like any game you play is like 60% at best of what the vision was when it got started, right? Yeah,
because you really find the fun once you start playing it, and then you realize what's necessary and what's not, and then you realize what you literally can't do because of technology, and you pare that back, and then we don't have all the time in the world or budget, so you pare it back a little more, and that's where you end up.
And I'll start with you, Rich, but when you think back to this whiteboard and you think about everything on there, do you laugh to yourself? Like, you were that ambitious, or that's what you thought the game would be?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, wouldn't it be cool? Like, that stuff goes up on the board, right? It's, it would be cool if we did this. It would be cool if we did that. And then you take a step back and you look at that board and you're like, that's going to take us 30 years. Like, how can we do all this? And so then you have to go through this triage process, figure out what's the most important, and then start building on it. And there are things, like I said earlier, there are things that we wanted to do for launch that we just couldn't get to. And we eventually did put in the game.
Talk to me about the things that you couldn't do. I figure you sit down, you make the boxes, we make the pillars, we're building block by block, and then you start in on a story. Is there a meeting with Bethesda Game Studios where you're like, we want to go X, Y, and you're like, not a chance. You can't do that. Like, were there sacred cows this way?
Yeah, those were laid out mostly before, just like, hey, you're going to, again, boxes, here's where you are. You stay inside here. You can do basically whatever you want. You want to get outside of that, come talk to us. So dragons, right? Dragons were verboten because Skyrim had just launched and was still going strong, and it was no dragons, right?
Yeah.
And eventually we're getting to the point in ESO's development where we want to introduce some cool new system. We're like, we need to do dragons. And they're like, okay, it's been long enough, and that's why there are dragons in elsewhere.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And then we had to come up with a reason why dragons existed in this place that nobody knew about.
Yep. And that was part of the fun of the negotiations, I guess, in all of that, which was, okay, dragons aren't generally in the second era. Why were they there? and How to Train Your Dragons was the thing that popped into my head. It was like, well, they just got released out of a vault. We could make something up. And
apparently, they were hiding in a cave for a very long time.
They were locked away in a cave, in a vault, and you accidentally set them free, and now you got to go fix your mistake, right? And
Yeah.
It was really cool.
So the other thing I would say that's interesting for me talking about this, you're like, okay, we can't start the game where Oblivion takes place because we were just there. So then how do you key in on other spots? And then is it again, I can't even fathom, like I'm a big Superman fan, right? But if you were to say, all right, cool, take the current run of Superman and build it, I'd be like, well, I got to go, it's going to take me 3 years to read everything to know. How do you get your head wrapped around what this place that you would know that you've seen on a map would look like, and it was in this letter that they said, like, what? I don't understand how that works at all.
I mean, it's just, again, it kind of goes back to you just start going and you just start building. You put something down on a whiteboard, and then that starts the conversations, and you take your steps, because it is overwhelming. Elder Scrolls is 30 years old.
1994.
1994. Wow. And generally, Bethesda Game Studios always focused on a single province and did like that super deep dive on the province. And really, Arena was the only game that had them all together. And so being able to dig through some Arena stuff, through lore books and all that other, and just pick and choose the really interesting bits. And that was something that the team really enjoyed. Like Rancer's War was a really good example of that, right? Digging through, and that was just a lore book, and we turned that into like an entire series of stories in Rivenspire.
Incredible.
Yeah.
What was it like creating hubs, right? We always talk about these big hubs, these center areas that everyone meets at. What is that like for your team? Of what were the fun ones? What were the challenging ones? What are the ones that don't get enough love? What are some that never were to be?
So I'm going to mangle this answer a little bit because I know I'll get called out by someone who watches this video. But I believe it was EverQuest made an amphitheater, and it was where players are going to get together and do performances, and everyone was going to go to the amphitheater. And of course, after launch, nobody went to the amphitheater, right? Everybody was in South Row, like fighting Dorn
between the commons,
right? In between the commons, and so that's the beauty of these games is it's hard to script what people are going to do when you get into the game. So we tried not to do that. We just tried to make a great fantasy world. And build, Daggerfall has to look like a medieval, English place, and what Black Marsh has to look like a swamp that lizard people would live in, right? And we just leaned into that, and then players made it what they want. And of course, it turned into they did all that around every way shrine in the game, in the major cities. But right, but we let them do it. We didn't try to lead it, into a conclusion.
Yeah, we focused really heavily on the services side of things. Making sure that there was a location somewhere in a zone where they got the things, the vendors, all of the crafting stations, like all that. That was the focus. And then, like Matt said, let players figure it out. And when it came to like biggest problems, biggest challenges, it was what happens if everybody decides this is the hub, this is the city, and that's where they go. And we have a few of those. Rockahaw was one of them, right? Where that was the top end.
Is that how you pronounce it?
That's how I pronounce it. But I also say Arcanist.
Classic.
You say that's
the
not
classic.
the right way.
The classic.
Rocka.
Rocka. But yeah, so it's right. It's just kind of a guess.
Yeah.
Best guess.
And who knew that players would end up our number one place where players get together is in the middle of the desert. In Hammerfell, because it's a very it's like 3% better. More efficient leveling there. So because they figured out where the dark anchors fall and how the way shrines are closer to the dark anchors in that zone than anyone else. And there's this literally this train of I don't know, hundreds of players that run through that zone 24/7, right? And it's like you think Moloch Ball would stop invading that zone because it's literally a dark anchor falls in, and it's an immediate bloodbath, and then they run on to the next one. But
and
we didn't design that. That's just players found it.
Yeah, and I think the other big part in that too was access to guild traders.
Yeah,
like they were literally right next to the way shrines, so people could just way shrine in, take 2 steps. The guild traders were there. They get their stuff, and then they get out. So yeah, it's interesting.
I know. I said I would let you go on this episode, but a question I have here is like, is that loss of control not maddening for you?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's the same design as like universities, a lot of time, if they're redoing a quad or a field or something, they don't actually put in the paths first. They wait and see where people walk, and then they pave them. Right? That's kind of what we do.
Interesting. Yeah, because like it's something we talked about in the previous episodes. We're going to talk about the community going forward, since the this big update you guys are here to talk about is all about that. But it's that idea for me of like y'all exist in such a interesting and special place, which I know but we talk every day on Games Daily about these games that are. This happens. They're starting up. They're doing the thing. They're out. They failed. They didn't. That first week, dead. Not enough people showed up. They're pulling the plug. Yada yada. There's a million games that line the streets as corpses like this, right? But for you guys to be able to come out, struggle like we talked about, but find what you need, then get to iterate, change, go, evolve with this, and get to this point, like. It's just such a special thing that I don't know. And I guess I shouldn't even hypothesize. Do you think, Matt, and I'm coming to you, Rich, do you think that that's something that can still exist in 2025? That games can launch like this and be like, hey, it ain't going to be perfect because you need to help us make it perfect?
No Man's Sky, Valheim, those games exist very much, and they become better if the developer sticks with it through the criticism stage.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
And so it all depends what your goals are when you launch, right? If your goal is to launch a completely finished game that's that's going to have 5 million active players, and that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's
the people at the top who usually need to understand that.
On that level, but it's always good to build the foundation and build the world and test it a little bit. Like Valheim was perfect for that, right?
Sure.
The first word, Hades. I mean, there's many of these games
that
that do it in a way that failure is not catastrophic, right? Because it's built into the plan.
Love that. Okay. Rich, that was pretty well said. Maybe you're off the hook.
I mean, he's right. I think we were also in the very fortunate position that Robert believed in us, believed in the IP, and didn't quit. Like, he didn't quit on us.
Yeah.
He forced us not to quit.
Right, exactly. And that was a big thing. Like, there's not a lot of companies around that have that kind of foresight and leadership. So
yeah, there was literally a meeting after launch with just a few of us, me and Robert and some of the higher ups at ZeniMax, and basically it was like, all right, didn't go the way you planned, right?
Yeah.
Now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And that was literally and the subtext was very clear, which is don't wallow in misery and get fixated on comments on YouTube, right? Just tell me how you're going to fix it, and what's the plan to go forward, and because we did have a lot of players, and they were very, very. Robert was very, very aware of this cadre of players that was smaller than we thought, but who was playing every day, and that was the argument that always won, and so he gave us the runway to do that.
Yep. A couple episodes. I want to get back.
I'm gonna let you go.
But I do want to talk about it. We keep occasionally in this story coming back to Robert Altman. I mentioned, of course, the late great. Was he special? It seems like everybody who ever talks about him in relation to this. Can you explain to a listener or viewer who doesn't know who he is, what his role was, why he was so special?
So he was the founder of ZeniMax Media. And he had
you start grinning because you're like, all right, here comes the diagram tree of the company.
So he was a Washington D.C. lawyer, banker, right? Worked with Clark Clifford, who was one of the advisors to presidents, and I think a Secretary of Defense back in the day. And so he was a connected guy in D.C. And so in 1999, he started ZeniMax to be a media holding company where they would buy different companies, and it was 1998. It was .com era, so they bought a lot of companies, including this little startup called Bethesda Softworks, which had been around for 15 years.
Sure. Then
the .com bubble burst, and they were basically left with Bethesda, which is why there's only been ZeniMax and Bethesda. There were other companies in the umbrella for a brief shining moment before Rich and I were there, but it basically turned into we're going to be the management company for Bethesda. So Robert was not a game guy. He was a business/human guy, right? And so he very much looked to people to solve problems, and he mentored people to become the people that would be able to make big decisions and be the people that would bring the company forward. And so if you know anything about Bethesda throughout the years, very strong personalities, right? Very firm vision on what what we do and how we do it. And that almost universally came from Robert. It was like, tell me what you're going to do and do it. Right. And don't squirm around. I don't want to hear,
he did not like puffery.
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
all.
He could tell if you were bullshitting.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't be mean about it. He would be like, just collect yourself for a minute. Tell me what you're actually trying to say.
Yeah.
Right. Tell me the bad stuff. If I don't know the bad stuff, I can't help you. Right. And of course we always tried to hide the bad stuff, but it was near impossible because he was really, really good at just understanding problems and then helping you figure out how to solve them. Even if he didn't know the answer, he knew the process that it would take to get there.
Yeah, to me, his superpower was he made you feel like you were always heard. It didn't matter what level you were or anything like that. You could be a frontline dev, you could be a senior exec. He found a way to connect with you and actually make you feel like he listened to you.
Yeah, you were always the most important person in the room when he was talking to you, right?
Yeah.
He focused in, and there was like, and he cared about people as people, like not just as game developers or people that work for him. He knew your family. He knew right, and he cared. I mean, it was very, very human level that I haven't seen anywhere else. Like it's impossible to describe kind of the family feel that ZeniMax had because it was a very close knit organization of people that really cared about each other.
Yeah. I've talked to other developers, other people connected, and I've always heard that. And I don't think it's something that gets talked about enough because usually these podcasts are so short and these interviews are so on point. But it is that idea of like, God bless them, right? Because like I feel, and I'm on a soapbox now, but that's what's missing from the equation on so many of these companies, where it is the chase the bottom line, chase the profit. You said, I love it. Failure is not catastrophic, right? But for so many people, they don't have the stomach for it. That's not what I was in here. I was in here to make a Fortnite. You're not making Fortnite, so see you later.
Yeah. And his going in position to any project was make a great game, and the business will follow. Right. Don't. This isn't necessarily my story to tell, but there's Todd has said this many times, but the wisdom in the industry was not that RPGs were dead when Oblivion was greenlit, and Robert was like, "Is it going to be a good game? Is it going to be the best RPG ever?" And they were like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Do it."
Yeah,
right. And it's like that means no one else is making RPGs, and come out at a time when there were no other RPGs, and it was one of the best games ever made.
Hell yeah.
So that's his personality. Was like if he trusted you, that you were passionate about it, that was the key.
I love that. Well, rest in peace, of course. We lost him in 2021. Yeah. Mike, I want to get you back onto your Elder Scrolls train. I know you got your bullet points. You didn't bring your glasses.
That was so special. It's just a tough one to follow up.
Well, that's why I want to follow it up by reminding everybody that this is the Elder Scrolls Online podcast, a Kind of Funny Gamescast special limited series. If you like that, thank you. Like, subscribe, share, support us however you can. And for right now, here's a word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the Elder Scrolls Online. Every legend starts somewhere, and in ESO, it starts with you. Join the millions of players in the award-winning online fantasy RPG. Write your story into a vibrant chapter of Tamriel's distant past and discover a world steeped in adventure and possibility. ESO is more than a game, it's a virtual world where you belong. This year, ESO is breaking the mold and introducing the Content Pass, complete with 2 new dungeon packs, 2-part story content, a brand new zone to explore, and a world-changing in-game event, all released throughout the year. And talking about story, 2025 brings us the Seasons of the Worm Cult, a direct sequel to ESO's main story. Travel to the never-before-explored island of Solstice, where worm cult activity is surging. It's up to you to unite the 3 alliances against this old foe that has mysteriously returned. Pick up the Elder Scrolls Online now on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC.
This episode is brought to you by Imperial. We've told you all how important it is to developers to wishlist games that you're interested in. So if this sounds cool to you, make sure you wishlist it. Imperial is a complex, feature-rich action RPG where you'll be sent to a planet in a far-off corner of the galaxy to explore an imposing monolith. As an elite mercenary, you'll join the expedition tasked with unearthing the secrets of the monolith and face off against the deadly automatons within. In Imperial, you'll explore 4 vastly different quadrants of the monolith, accessible only by using mysterious artifacts known as cartograms. Each cartogram affects which enemies, boss fights, and loot will appear when you enter the monolith, so no 2 excursions will be the same. Find even more cartograms to explore by looting defeated enemies or buy them from other players online at the trading post. Imperial features 3 weapon archetypes: the fast-paced acrobatic glaive, the defense-focused mace and shield, or the devastating cannon, with a range of customizable skills and abilities that can make short work of the awaiting automatons. Your weapons and abilities can be changed before any excursion into a cartogram, so if a loadout isn't working for you, you can mix things up to create the perfect playstyle. Help the members of the expedition in deep branching quests and aid other players in asynchronous multiplayer. Get ready, mercenaries. The monolith awaits. Imperial is available May 8th on PC, Xbox Series X and S, and PS5. Wishlist now. It helps so much. Wishlist Imperial.
This episode is brought to you by Aura Frames. If you haven't called your mom in a while, here is your reminder to do it. But then you want to go above and beyond. Mother's Day is coming up, and I have the perfect gift idea. Aura Frames are incredibly smart and easy to use, allowing you to upload unlimited photos and videos directly from your phone to the frame. Plus, you can order the frame online and preload it with photos and videos using the Aura app, so it's ready to go right out of the box. It's a gift so special, they'll use it every day. Greg, Kevin, and a ton of people here at Kinda Funny are obsessed with their Aura frames. It takes about 2 minutes to set up a frame using the Aura app. So the next time you need to call your mom, you can also send her a new pic of you from that trip that you're telling her all about. Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's AURA frames.com, promo code Kinda Funny. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's super great that mental health awareness is growing, but there's still progress to be made. 26% of Americans who participated in a recent survey say they have avoided seeking mental health support due to fear of judgment. We can do better. No reason for fear. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching people with the right therapist from their diverse network of more than 30,000 licensed therapists with a wide range of specialties. Some of my best friends use BetterHelp and love how helpful it can be for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. We're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/kindafunny to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/kindafunny. BetterHelp.com/kindafunny.
All right, big dog.
Yeah, let's get in. Let's have some fun. It's wild where I want to go, and I know we have a lot of time, so we'll be able to jump all over the place. But yeah, I want to talk about zones really quick, right? We talk about the map and building it out and adding new zones. What is that like, finding that balance of keeping a player in a zone, making sure they see enough of it before they move on to the next zone? The pacing wise, you always talk about it in the past couple episodes of like the Elder Scrolls player, you put them in the world and they just go wherever they want, right? Yep. And so is there a push and pull? I think it was so great before the ad break of talking about the players are the ones that are driving this, right? So is it hard to be like, hey, we want you to go from quest A to quest B, do all this, and then go to the next zone, when really it's, well, now with the world that it is, I can go anywhere and just have a great time.
It took a while for us to get right, but we learned a lot in terms of tricks and tips and things. And I think the biggest thing for us was just making sure that there was something cool over every hill, every rock. Waterfalls have to have chests behind them. P.S. My wife will kill me if I don't put one back there, right? Because she's that explorer, right?
When you go behind it, it's just a surface. Like, what the heck?
Right. A player gets to a cool spot, they want something neat. And it doesn't always have to be a chest. It can just be like a cool little vignette scene of a skeleton with an arrow in its knee or in its head or something like that. And then players can make their own stories up. But yeah, so we focus a lot on just creating interesting locations for players to find. And then when we're telling our stories, we try to guide them through areas where they might get sidetracked and discover something else. So those are kind of the two big things. And then there's lots of like world building tips and tricks with lighting and stuff like that. If it's brighter over here than over here, generally your eye's going to draw you over there. So you go that direction. It's those kinds of things.
Our team had, very much led by a guy named Jared Carr, who has since retired. He's an amazing art director, but he was very good at, whenever you crest the hill, there should be something behind it that looks awesome, right? To make people want to climb hills and keep going, right? And the reveal right? The scenes are in ESO are all because of that, and it's very, very, very well done. Also, ESO is basically a masterpiece of art style and fidelity, where because we have a really forgiving engine that can run on many different types of on our PCs, right? It looks fantastic, but not everyone has super high-end gaming rigs, and ESO runs on just about anything. And so, but when you get to the running on lower power devices, it still looks amazing because of the art style, right? Sure. It doesn't have the fidelity of turning on all the settings, but it still looks amazing. And that's a very hard thing to do. And we managed to pull that off.
Yeah. When we talk about the engine, what was that like when we talk about console, in particular Xbox One, now we move on to the next generation. What was that moment of, well, we can do all of this. Are we leaving this behind? How do we find that blend to make sure everyone can see it in all of its glory?
Well, this leads down a whole other tangent that we haven't even gotten to, and we probably don't have time for this. But
what are you talking about? You're all talking about the world.
We have our own engine for ESO, right? And we started by licensing an engine, and we basically over time before launch just swapped it all out for our own. So it makes decisions like going to console, or hey, now the next generation of consoles out, and we want to do cool lighting and shaders, and since we can do that all ourselves because it's our engine, it makes that possible. And our engine, our client, was specifically designed for scalability. Like it has to look great on high-end machines, and it has to run great on low-end machines within reason.
There you go.
Really quick before we get away from zones, just two more
I
fun
wasn't going
ones.
anywhere.
Okay,
Stay here in
good.
camp. It's your
Let's
zone.
hang
This is
out.
your
Let's
zone,
have-
Mike.
On the zones, I want to talk about revisiting some starter zones, which we're about to do here. I think that's really important and special. We talked about the new players jumping in and what they're experiencing. What was that like to finally circle back? How long did it take the team after 10 years to be like, oh man, the starting areas, maybe we should go back there and relook at those?
I mean, over time, as we've launched new things, right? Our tools have matured. We've matured as developers. Our art has matured. And a lot of those starter zones were, I guess, some of the last ones we built before launch, but they weren't up to the same standards as like our latest chapters or latest DLCs. And so when we first started talking about, looking at the new player experience and bringing players back to the game, returning players, we knew we had to go and do something there because they were good, but they weren't as good as what they should be. And we started digging into what that meant. And we looked at everything. We looked at, specifically lighting, doing propping, doing clutter passes, and then swapping out like ancient assets for newer ones and whatnot. And it really changed the spaces. Like just doing the water, going from the old water to the new water was night and day difference. Night and day.
We have old water in there.
Very, very old water, yeah. So
Was there pushback at all from the team? And I know the community's just learning about all this and stuff like that. But of like, well, why are we going back to a starter zone when we have so many people?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, half the team pushed back. Why are we doing? The other half were like, we want to do more.
Yeah.
We want to go back and fix everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Can we just burn this down to the ground and start again? Like, no. But yeah, it's like we were talking about when Tamriel, right? The team plays the game as well, and they want to be perfectionists. And yeah, looking at your older stuff, you want to redo it. And we had to find that balance between a complete overhaul and just touching some stuff up.
I know I am number one when it comes to guilty of this, but I am the player that when I get something new, I always ask, well, what's next? What can we expect? And what is that balance? Like, how tough is it to put out a new zone and then think about, okay, we're putting out another new zone in the next one? What's the balance of new zones? Of course, we'll get into new classes eventually, but what is that balance of, hey, let's do it this update, but let's skip the next two updates and then do a new zone? Is there a balance? Is there a perfect world, or is it just we got to do it every single time?
A lot comes down to what teams are doing what and where they are in the process. Like it takes a while to build a zone. So like we're releasing this first half of Solstice, or in June, I guess it is. The team's been working on that for 9 months already.
Wow.
And they're already working on the second half of that as well. And so it just comes down to how much bandwidth does the team have. That's why we generally do like a dungeon update, and then we do a story update, and then we'll do like a systems-y update, and then we'll do another story update, and we just kind of leapfrog the teams that way.
Generally, we divide players into different behavior types, which is like co-op PvE, story-based, questing, systems based, like crafting and right. And we want to make sure that every year we kind of hit those groups at least with a couple of new things, like new dungeons for co-op PvE, a new story, new quest, new zone for the story people, which is kind of the foundation of the game, of course, being Elder Scrolls. But we always try to pop in a new system, like the card game or housing, or there's so many of them at this point, antiquities, and those are the things that give players a ton of things to do over time, but we don't have to handcraft all of them. So you can put that system in the game for antiquities, and then we just add a couple of antiquities every once in a while to give a new scavenger hunt for players to run around on. So we consciously have a cycle where we try to hit the different groups of players with new content like that.
Can we talk a little bit about the wall? Of course, we have something new coming our way, and it's exciting, right? The mystery, what is? Has there been stuff in the past that you've done that you really like highlight, like this was a cool moment, map wise, zone wise, and just player experience wise, similar to what we'll experience with the wall?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the next evolution for us in terms of a major event
And
in
let
the
me
game.
stop you because I want to know. There's plenty of people who are the kind of funny who, they watched the direct like a month ago. What is the wall? What are we talking about for the new update?
So the soul wall is this giant wall of soul magic, I guess.
Dope.
That is separating the western and eastern halves of Solstice. And so
Hence the two parts broken up. I like
it's the
that.
two parts, right, broken up. And the worm cult has kind of erected this thing to protect whatever's on the other side, and you don't know. And so as a server, you are working together to bring that wall down to open that second half up. So
Love
each
that.
server will progress in their own way, their own pace,
Wow,
which is
okay.
cool, right? We've never
Yes.
done that before. And
Pull it together, PlayStation 5 players. We gotta get this thing done.
and it's going to be really interesting to see how this works, right? We've never done something like this on this scale, and the team's really, really excited about it.
So now back to Mike's question. Sorry, of things that were similar to that or learning experiences on that path to the soul wall.
So I think the closest thing, we've got lots of events in game. We've got, the New Life Festival. We've got Witches Fest, things like that. We have our prologue quests. So those are the quests that kind of give you that little teaser into what's coming up. So Elsewhere is probably the closest thing where you unleash dragons on the world.
No big
So
deal.
that's kind of what this is
Yeah.
all about.
When you're talking about these giant events in this and the little things you've done to build this prologue, blah, 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 when you look at this, do you compare it to other, I know we already talked about it, what both of you, but what MMO online players you are, what does that speak to? Because you start talking about that, and it reminds me so much of Guild Wars 2, where there would be those giant events, right? We had to go out and
they're
do.
living world stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is that an inspiration for you?
Sure. I mean, we're all gamers. We take inspiration from games and movies and books and TV and all that. So
Okay.
That's really exciting. Talking about the new player experience, we talked on that. Of course, updating the intro and welcoming players on that new onboarding experience. I know me and Greg have jumped onto a couple of MMOs where they've had something fresh and new to welcome players that have maybe never been in the universe, or it's been quite some time. What has that been like, talking about jumping back to the starting areas, now creating kind of a new welcome, Matt? What's that like?
He's being careful.
Well,
look
no,
at him,
so
1,000-yard stare.
I wanted
politically
to figure out how we could go through and do this, but I think the best way is we use a lot of player metrics and player data to kind of help inform some of our decisions. And the launch tutorial that we had, a lot of the feedback we got was it was too long. Just get us into the game. We want to play.
Update 6 was our first new
New
tutorial.
yeah. And now we just launched 46?
Yeah,
Something like that. So, we try to use that to inform it. And that was good. That was an interesting thing. And then when we switched the model to chapters, we started talking about, well, how can we make it so that the tutorial kind of feeds directly into the new chapter? So you kind of get an idea of what it is, and maybe more players will go to the new stuff. So that was when we started thinking about, okay, let's do a new tutorial every year that, looking back, probably not the right
Pro
thing.
tip: don't do tutorial.
Probably not the right thing. But yeah, and so we just started continuing to iterate through that. And then we took a really hard look at that and what it was doing to player retention numbers and things like that. With Gates of Adamant, I don't know if you guys remember that, but I guess that was last year's tutorial that we did, where you get to the end of the tutorial and then there's different portals in the room that allow you to pick whatever zone you want to go to, depending on what access you have.
Yeah, which sounded great to us.
Yeah, it was awesome.
But imagine you're a player who has never experienced this world before, and you go through a tutorial, and then there's a choice of things that you have no concept of what you're choosing. And
Can I tell
there's
you,
like
when you
10
launched the
portals,
game, I was on the phone with all my friends, like, what alliance did you choose?
Yeah,
Where are we going?
Yeah.
How do we all stick together? So, yeah, like,
Yeah, and so again, you know, looking back at it, it's kind of like, well, duh, like. Why would you give players that many choices when they're just starting the game?
Hey, why not go back to the tutorial that has Jennifer Hale and John Cleese?
Right.
It's like, why
Exactly.
would you ever
And
not
Michael
do that?
Gambon,
And Michael Gambon, right.
And so we did that, and we went back and we kind of, this latest tutorial that's out right now is very much the old one, but with a lot of improvements, focusing on the areas that players need in terms of core mechanics to understand the game and be able to play the game better.
and introduce the story, the main story, right, and not a chapter story.
Sure.
Because it got really confusing for people that started in, say, Morrowind, and they did it, and they finished the story, and then they're like, oh, wait, there's more, right? And then there's like not 70, but, you know, there's a ton of other zones and stories, and that they were kind of sheltered from until that. And this is a much better way to get players in to see kind of the whole game and explain the alliances, because you go to an alliance city first now, and so forth and so on, and the new starter zones too.
I like that we've come all the way back to starter zones and how you start the game, because I still want to talk about this whiteboard. And I'll get out of here. Sorry.
I love it.
But it's you guys, it's Bethesda Game Studios. You're figuring out, you're noodling the story. You get this thing going, and then this is something I honestly don't know. Like, what happens next? Is it, we talked about it being mechanics and a PvP pace, and this is it that somebody goes and you start really rough with an engine? Do you also hire writers at that time to start noodling on this story? Like, where does that kind of thing go?
So project wise, we started with the whiteboard map of what the alliances are and which provinces were in which alliances, and that made a world exist. And then inside of that, it's like, okay, then you have to, then it gets to your point, which is, what is a zone? Right. And it's like, and that's usually a technical exercise of how much stuff can you load in at one time? Are there loading screens between zones? We actually had a version of Tamriel that there were no loading screens, and then we decided to go to loading screens for a whole other reason, which we haven't talked about, which is our mega server technology, which allows a lot of the social systems that we have in the game. But it was the right call, but we had to go back and which is why in many zones, you just walk and you hit an invisible wall and then you zone, and that's because that's an original game zone that used to just be able to walk into the other zone.
Interesting.
But and we didn't have to worry so much about memory and stuff in that sense. But yeah, so it's like you're making the Daggerfall Covenant. Okay, you got to have Daggerfall, right? Okay, let's start in Glen Umber, which everybody knows from the game Daggerfall. And then what's in there? Okay, the Redguard are there, so you got to have Sentinel. And the orcs are there, and we're not going to give the orcs a homeland until after launch.
Yeah, they're the underdogs for
right,
sure.
but that's where it starts. And we had an engine. We started prototyping things. We actually had zones that were too big, zones that were too small, zones that made no sense at all. And then we've, like I said in last episode, we fixated on Stormhaven because we needed to focus the team on one zone.
Let's get something correct.
And then replicate that throughout the rest. And so Stormhaven actually grew and shrank and had many quests in it, and then had not enough quests in it. And finally, we hit the right balance of it's 15 hours to get through a zone. I forget. We came up with
it's about
with a metric.
15 to 20 hours.
Right. And then we replicated Stormhaven to Rivenspire, which we also redid about 50 times. And
it was only 5. But it was, I mean, it's known to us internally as Revisionspire because we redid it so many times.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So then
it's playing trial and error. Really.
Yeah. Yep. At what point, or is this while you're doing all the trial and error for the zones? Are you having somebody concurrently write?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we knew what the stories were going to be for the zones early on.
Gotcha.
So there's a main story that carries the player from the tutorial through to the alliance, to the end of the alliance, and then into Cold Harbor, which is where the story ended in the launch version of the game. And so we had that spine. And then you see what POIs, what points of interest there are in each zone, and then you start writing a little quest thing for each of those, and then so the stories just kind of grow from there. But it's pick your characters, pick the spine that moves the player through the zones, and and then go from there. And we had 10 really good voice actors, and we made sure to split them up among alliances or in the main story, so that
you already gave a shout out to Jennifer Hale, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Commander
I
Shepard
mean,
herself.
I think the best way to think about it is we tried to build a box for the teams that, you know, had that spine, had a couple of key points, and then let the team go and fill out the world. And so a lot of that stuff just kind of started to organically happen as the team started to iterate on things.
Talk to me about, are you guys then, I know it's not really your thing, but are you going to these, like, I got to see Kate Beckinsale. I gotta go listen to John Cleese.
Some people
do
were
VO.
lucky enough to do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You guys, you're trying
I
to get
wasn't,
together.
but
Yeah. I have
and,
to imagine.
and there's lots of neat stories.
Give me some of them.
John Cleese, maybe? Going to his island in order to record
that
him?
was the second one.
That was the second one?
The first one was funnier, which was so you always get contracts, right? These are busy people that have a lot to do, and we got the message that based on his schedule, right, he was going to be recording in Morocco,
right?
Because he was there, and so which is fine, right? This is voiceover. You know, you set up you can set
Put
all
them in the
this up.
closet. Put the blanket over the door. You're all set.
Exactly. So after going through the technical exercise of getting the equipment to Morocco, and which we have a team dedicated, which we still have a team dedicated to doing VO at Sauce. You know, they set it up, and then of course it turns out we basically financed a week of John Cleese vacationing in Morocco, right? And where he worked for a couple hours a day, very professionally, right?
Yeah.
Right to record the lines.
Like, what are you in Morocco for, John? Oh, you guys.
Yeah. And then when we brought him back for Elsewhere, it was the same story but in the Caribbean.
Yeah,
I love that.
And they went to a big ballroom and built a blanket fort as a
tent.
sound booth.
Yeah.
So he crawled under this tent and recorded his lines. In the,
I
in
love
the
that.
tent. Yeah,
I love that. I love that. Meanwhile, Kate Beckinsale just went to a studio in LA.
Well, the LA actors, right? That's what it's all set up. You don't
Sure.
have to do anything,
Sure.
anything special for that. But we released a video right before launch that actually has some behind the scenes stuff with all the actors talking about their characters and everything, and it's well worth it to go back and look at that.
Yeah, because this isn't like it's a line and they're gone. Like,
oh no,
with these characters.
And we brought Kate back in.
I mean, every time that the Queen, right? is in there. We brought.
There's a chapter she was in.
I mean, Somerset.
She wasn't in Somerset.
With Raz and whatnot.
Yeah.
We're finally seeing them turn on each other.
I know. There's so many
it was
stories.
High Isle. When the Alliance leads came back.
And then like Alfred Molina came back
Yep.
for Abner Thorne.
And Elsewhere. He's amazing to work with, like super professional.
Is there
very
a
good.
moment? I mean, I know again. Okay, there's Hollywood people on the board. So, but is there still a moment where like I can't believe we're working with these people?
Oh yeah, every day.
Yeah.
I mean, Troy Baker, right? Who's like
but Troy sucks. It's fine.
but it's like he's a voice of Indiana Jones, and he's additional voices in ESO, right?
Yeah.
But he's done so many lines for ESO just because they're so good at doing different voices. And
Troy's amazing.
And
Laura Bailey's been in there too.
Laura Bailey's there. Yeah. She's one of the major companions that you can get have follow you around and talk to you all the time. So her character's great. Yeah.
One of the things you talked about back there, and I think we're starting to get, as we move on in the timeline here and flesh out there, is what was it like? You talk about, okay, well, Oblivion was there, so we don't want to go there. But then, of course, you've done, okay, well, now we're going to Morrowind. Now you've started going back to the places, obviously, that people know from Elder Scrolls. What's that like? And is there a process with that again of having to go meet with Bethesda and check with their historian or somebody of like this, that, the other? Or then also then the expectation of, well, I know this, and in my playthrough of Skyrim there was this thing, and it said it's been there for thousands of years.
So we have to have the Lawrence discussion.
We
now.
do, yeah.
Lawrence discussion.
Yeah. So Lawrence Schick is was one of the original ESO team members. Many people watching this have just gone, I know that guy, because he was one of the original 10 designers of D&D. So he did a White Plume Mountain module in 1970, whatever, right? He was an original OG game designer. He's amazing. He ended up, he worked for us for years and years and years. He was the lore master. So his job was literally keep everything on a timeline that made sense.
Because this is canon, right? This is all
absolutely.
It's all canon, and so he was the liaison to BGS, so we could make sure that everything was copacetic on the timeline and our character names were right, all that stuff. That all went through Lawrence, and he kind of whipped all that into shape with like guidelines for everything, and basically made the characterization of ESO and fitting it into the timeline was coherent. Because before he was there, everyone could name things, and there were crazy names all over the place. And but,
yeah, it was kind of the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
And
So
he came in, tightened his belt, said, "Not at my watch."
Yeah, and I mean, and then when it comes to like where do we go next? How do we choose the next thing?
Yeah.
A lot of that is like conversations between Matt and I. And it comes down to like looking at what we've done, and we try to do almost the exact opposite the next time, so it doesn't feel like it's samey. And a lot of times we talk about like a word to kind of evoke the emotion and rally the team around things. So like elsewhere I think it was revenge.
Yeah.
The dragons.
Morrowind was nostalgia.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that.
Greymoor was gothic.
Yep.
But your question about zones, Morrowind, we literally used the height map from the game Morrowind from Elder Scrolls 3. We imported it in and made our zone based on that.
That's awesome.
So we actually leaned into making sure that we had because we were 600 years before the events of Morrowind, so we could have lots of call outs to what was going to happen 600 years later. And if you play through it and you played Elder Scrolls 3, you'll be like, I know that guy, or oh, that's the grandfather of that guy, or right. So it's full of references and Easter eggs if you played Elder Scrolls 3.
My question then would become, as we move out of these the zones, the story, how do you get to something like nuts and bolts of like, all right, here's the classes we're going to have, and obviously you've added since then. I mean, there's been a whole bunch of stuff, but like for this starting core, here's who you can be. How do you zone in on that, Rich?
That was really hard. And we didn't really start nailing that stuff down until like 2012.
Warrior in Stormhaven.
Yeah, it was,
and we don't even have a warrior in the game. That's the funny part. There is no class called warrior, but there was for 3 years.
Warrior in footy pajamas in Stormhaven. Yeah, that was. So it was just a lot of trial and error, a lot of trying to dig through like what are the kind of core fantasies that players want to fulfill as their class, and we ended up digging in on like the Dragon Knight and the Nightblade and the Templar, Paladin healer kind of thing.
Yeah,
and then Sork. Right, those were the originals.
Yeah. And how do they balance? A PvP game, how do you make sure no one's overpowered? Right, it's constant figuring out.
And the fun too with that is you could use any weapon and any armor type. And so like, how do you balance with all of that? And how do we've got this deck builder game, but your class is really just 3 skill lines. And then there's 10 others that you can add to. You
can make a healing based rogue, or you can make a heavy armor 2-handed sorcerer, right?
Yep.
It's like you can do all that in ESO, right? It's you can basically build really weird characters, and it's cool, right? Obviously, if you wanna do the most damage or you're into that, right? There's a clear paths that you need to take. But if you want to role play some pretty crazy combinations, it's all there.
And it's only getting crazier now, right? Again, the direct a couple weeks ago, we're talking about subclasses.
Yep.
Yeah. It's going to be...
But we're taking skill lines...
It's going to be interesting.
But we're taking skill lines that were balanced, right, and mixing it with other skill lines that are already balanced. So I'm sure there will be some revisions at some point because that's the way these work.
I was going to say, you were talking about balancing, but like I'm sure you've been shocked time and time again of what people figure out. And
Not so much shocked.
Okay.
This is my shock
but,
face.
Yeah, exactly. But we're not surprised.
Okay.
Right? Like
fair.
players are super ingenious when it comes to like thinking outside the box and doing things. There's the meme video that I'm sure everybody's seen about developers where the square peg goes in the round hole and the triangle goes in the right, like it goes in the square. Like that is game dev in a nutshell, and I laugh at that video every time I see it because we built it with this in mind, and players do the exact opposite. You're like, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good for you.
Right. Exactly. But leading up to subclassing, the last 3-4 years, we've been focused on balance and standardizing things and like going through literally every combat system and do that. And a lot of players are like, why are you doing it now? Why are you doing it now? Why are you doing it now? Well, it's because we were going to do kind of this at some point, and we had to make sure we got to a point where all of the lines were balanced to a specific point. So that when we started adding in all this other crazy, like now I can be a Nightblade with warden abilities, right? Or
Yeah.
I can be a necromancer and a warden and a sork, right? And have just pets galore. Like, what does that look like? And yeah, that there was a method to the madness, but it was a long haul.
Matt, does this play into something I've heard you say before, but it's the fact that there's no right or wrong way to play this game. And the other thing I've heard you say is like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was on McCaffrey's podcast where you were like, I don't even call this an MMO anymore.
Right.
Talk to me about that. Our next episode is all about community, so I think it's a good build up to that.
That's a good GDC presentation. What is an MMO? And the answer there, every game's an MMO. FIFA is an MMO.
Sure.
I mean, like it's multiplayer in massive numbers is everywhere at this point. But yeah, it's MMO is more of a technology than a game design now. It's a technology that,
I love that.
Lets people play together in whatever way the game designer wants them to play.
Yeah. So then, is that all tied up together then? And do you, again, same look at the whiteboard and the stuff that didn't make it and laugh. Do you look at your conceptions and your preconceived notions of, hey, we're launching this PvP focused Elder Scrolls game? And PvE, yes.
Yeah.
But it was one of your pillars. It was your first pillar.
It was one of the three. Yes.
Okay. But do you look at it now and then go, like, you see people just cooking or people just running around building their homes or whatever it is?
It is when you hand the game to the community on launch day, right? You lose control. Not all control. You lose some control.
Of course.
Right? And then you look at what players do. And did we think we were going to have one of the premier end games in the game was going to be housing? No, we had no idea. But we're very happy that it is. Yeah. And I think the quote I did on that podcast, which is what I usually say, so I'm going to do it on this one.
Thank you.
Is
in your face, McCaffrey. We're stealing your content.
If you ask 5 ESO players to describe the game that they're playing, they will describe 5 different games. And to me, that means we've succeeded because we've made a virtual world where different activities are valid and fun, and players love to do them together.
Michael?
I'm just going to mic drop on that.
That's great.
You covered on your stuff?
Yeah, I'm excited to jump into the community. We've tiptoed around PvP, and I think community really drives that, so we'll talk about that. Housing is a fun one, Greg, the addition of all of that. So I'm really looking forward to talking about the community that drives this game and the things that they really love, the things that they want, the things maybe they've given you a lot of feedback on, and we've changed up. And we'll talk more about that next time.
Yeah. We asked for questions. There was one question that kept getting asked. We're going to ask it next time.
Oh.
Don't worry about
Now
it.
I'm sure we've heard
I'm very interested.
No, I know you have. I don't think any. Don't worry about it. Everybody, this has been episode 3 of The Elder Scrolls Online podcast, a Kind of Funny Gamescast limited series. Thank you for your time and attention. Remember, of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks for our final episode on Friday, May 23rd. Of course, if you like this, like, subscribe, share, wherever you're getting it. Well, maybe it's over on the Elder Scrolls Online channels. Maybe it's over on the Kind of Funny channels. No matter where it is, we couldn't do it without your support. So until next time, it's been our pleasure to serve you.